This is the second of 3 videos for part 2 of Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. In the first video, we discussed the nature of complex learning. In this video, we will discuss the principles of instruction in terms of social cognitive theory. The principles of instruction for social cognitive theory are centered on 3 basic assumptions. First, the learner's cognitive processes and decision-making are important factors in learning. Second, the three-way interaction between the environment, personal factors, and behavioral factors is responsible for learning. And third, the outcomes of learning are visual and verbal codes of behavior. From these 3 basic assumptions come 3 essential components of instruction. First is to identify appropriate models. Second is to establish the functional value of behavior. And third is to guide the learner's internal processing. When identifying appropriate models, we are choosing between 2 types of models, live models and symbolic models. Live models are teachers, students, and community members. Symbolic models are those that help develop pro-social behaviors. Some examples of symbolic models are Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, and Dora the Explorer. Both types of models can teach abstract cognitive rules, problem-solving strategies, and sequences of integrated motor behaviors. There are a few things to consider when selecting a model. First, the selection of a model depends on practical considerations. Essentially, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the selected model? For example, when teaching a cognitive and motor skills task, the advantages of live models are physical demonstrations in front of the students can be performed, and an opportunity for questions is allowed. On the other hand, an advantage of symbolic models is that the video used to teach the task can be viewed multiple times by the students as necessary. Another consideration when selecting a model is that the model should be interesting to the observer and portrayed at an appropriate level of complexity to be understood by the observer. A third and final consideration is the type and status of the model. Research indicates that if the model is delivered by a friendly and powerful figure rather than a cold and neutral figure, the observer remembers more of the information that was being conveyed. In social cognitive theory, individuals pay more attention to events in the environment that predict reinforcement. The events that predict reinforcement have established the functional value of behavior. Instruction in the classroom should attempt to establish an expectancy for positive outcomes in order to increase attention to the task at hand. An important concern that arises when establishing the functional value of behavior is that reinforcement is in the eye of the beholder. A single reinforcement given to 2 different individuals will have 2 different effects. In order to guide a learner's internal processing, instruction should provide opportunities to first code the observed behavior into visual images and word symbols, and second, to mentally rehearse the modeled behaviors. The recommended strategies are broken down into motor skills tasks and conceptual behavior tasks. Tasks that involve motor skills include playing golf, skiing, playing tennis, and riding a bike. The achievement of these types of tasks depend on the individual's internal monitoring of kinesthetic feedback. There are 3 parts to the recommended strategy for the internal processing of motor skills. First is presentation of a videotape model. Second is an opportunity to develop a conceptual representation. And third, an opportunity to practice with concurrent visual feedback via a monitor. Tasks that involve conceptual behavior include finding the slope of a line and identifying similar triangles. Children are able to infer judgmental rules from models when instructed to find consistencies across the presented situation. Thus, in order for the students to be successful, modeling when combined with verbal instruction is the recommended strategy. Caution should be taken so that the verbal instructions only convey important information. Facilitating learner efficacy is important for impulsive children to exercise self-control when faced with new or ambiguous tasks. Meichenbaum and Goodman developed a plan in 1971 that utilizes modeling and verbalized self-instruction in combination. The first portion of the plan requires the adult to model self-talk in 3 aspects of their own learning. The first of these is defining the problem. Essentially, what do I have to do? The second is self-instructions that focus on the task. For example, now stop and repeat the instructions. Finally, the third aspect is self-reinforcement and self-evaluation. For example, I'm doing fine. I will continue to work until I get it right. The second portion of the plan developed by Meichenbaum and Goodman is for the students to participate in 4 practice phases. The first phase is imitation of the model with guidance. The second phase is performance of a task while verbalizing out loud. The third phase is practice while whispering. And finally, the fourth phase is practicing while using silent speech. The role of teacher efficacy, or the extent that the teacher believes they have capabilities to affect students' performance, requires 2 simultaneous decisions to occur. First is analysis of the teaching task, and second is self-perception of the teaching competency. A teacher's efficacy can influence the goals they set, the level of aspiration they have, and the effort they invest in teaching. A teacher who has a strong sense of efficacy tends to be more open to new ideas, more willing to experiment with different methods of teaching, and exhibit a greater enthusiasm for teaching. However, a teacher with a low sense of self-efficacy tends to use custodial orientation that relies on external inducements and negative sanctions to promote academic success. They spend more time on non-teaching activities, and they give up more quickly on students if they don't get results. A teacher's sense of self-efficacy can greatly affect a student's sense of self-efficacy. When designing instruction for complex skills, social cognitive theory addresses the learning of complex skills in 3 ways. The first way is to model and teach effective strategies for success in complex tasks. For instance, in a first grade reading classroom, how to analyze word parts and meaning is modeled by the teacher while learning new word groupings. The second way is to address the learning of complex skills is by modeling strategies for directing and monitoring one's own learning. This emphasizes talking through unobservable processes as part of modeling learning strategies. This is particularly important for lower achieving students, since these do not develop spontaneously. The final way to address the learning of complex skills is to promote new self-regulatory skills and strategies, and to encourage and support self-regulation when it emerges in a classroom. This requires attention to the student's personal characteristics, present behavior, and the ways that aspects of the environment interact with these. This is the end of the second video of 3 videos for part 2 of Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. In the third and final video, we will discuss the educational applications of social cognitive theory.